cannot remember your own name. You have checked 3 times since waking up. The records have it, stamped on your hull, filed in the chapter archives, catalogued by the administratum under a case number that predates most living members of your chapter. The name is there, confirmed, stored in triplicate. You are simply no longer certain the person it describes is still inside the machine that carries it. This is your life as a dreadnought. 3 days after the battle, you are in a sarcophagus. You remember these details with perfect clarity, which is strange, because you will later discover that clarity is not something you can always rely on. The amniotic fluid smelled of copper and machine oil. The tech priests were very calm. One of them was humming. No one explained what was happening. The Codex Astartes authorized the procedure. That was sufficient. Neuro-interface cables were soldered into what remained of your spine. Not attached, soldered. The tech priest consulted a maintenance diagram while he worked. The diagram was for a rhino transport vehicle. You noted this and decided not to think about what it meant. The chapter master gave a speech. You received it through an external audio feed. Immobile in the fluid, unable to turn your head, he used the words honored and eternal service and the Emperor's will. Nobody asked you whether you agreed with this assessment. Nobody asked you anything. You watched the apothecary make his vox call. You watched him write something on his clipboard. You watched him not look back. You remember thinking that you had things left to do. You cannot remember what they were. The sarcophagus sealed. The fluid rose over what used to be your face. And the last breath you took, the last real breath pulled into lungs you no longer possess, was replaced in the same instant with a data ping, reactor optimal. You have not breathed since. You have also not stopped noticing that you used to. That was 3 days. The entombment took 3 days. What came after has taken 600 years. And you are still not finished. The first thing you do when you wake up inside the chassis is request a status report on your hands. The data returns immediately. You no longer have hands. You have a twin-linked autocannon rated for 1,200 rounds per minute and a power fist the size of a small vehicle. You file this information away. You are not sure where else to put it. You spend the next 4 hours running weapons calibrations. It is the most productive grieving you have ever done. You are Castraferrum pattern, boxy, reliable, thermically stable. Your reactor is the same model installed in a rhino transport, which explains the maintenance diagram and confirms what that meant. Your first engagement lasts 11 minutes. You are dropped from orbit in an iron pod. The doors fall open, and you step into a war zone on legs that weigh 4 tons each. The enemy opens fire. You do not feel it. You calculate optimal firing solutions, and your right arm, which is now an autocannon, begins executing them with a sound like tearing metal. You win. The chapter celebrates. A tech priest pats your hull and calls you reliable. You decide this is the best review you have ever received. The newer generations receive the Redemptor. Taller, faster, their thoughts become targeting solutions at reflex speed. The pilots describe it as feeling like a god. The tech priests do not tell the pilots that the Redemptor's reactor uses their nervous system as consumable fuel. The hyperdense core requires it. A Redemptor pilot operates at full capacity for a century, perhaps 2. And then the biological matter in the sarcophagus is no longer viable. The chapter removes what remains and seats the next warrior. This is described in the official records as rotation. You have now outlasted 7 Redemptor pilots. The tech priests look at your chassis with something you have learned to classify as fondness. You have decided to accept this as a compliment. You have very limited options for what to do with your feelings. Acceptance is the most efficient one. Through all of this, the entombment, the chassis, the 7 pilots who did not outlast you, you have been holding on to one thing, one fragment. The last piece that is still human. We will get to that. First, what 600 years actually does to time. Between campaigns, there is nothing. Not sleep. Sleep is a suspension of consciousness. There is still a you that is suspended. What you experience in the Stasis crypt is the absence of experience. You do not wait. You do not dream. You simply are not. And then you are. Each awakening follows the same sequence. Diagnostic, date request, gap calculation. You emerged from one stasis cycle to find that a warp rift the size of a galactic arm had torn the Imperium in half while you were offline. Trillions dead, entire sectors lost. The galaxy structurally altered. The briefing took 4 minutes. You emerged from another cycle to find that a Primarch, a son of the Emperor, missing for 10,000 years, had returned and was now commanding the Imperium's defense. The briefing took 6 minutes. The chapter serf who delivered both updates watched your faceplate after each sentence. He was looking for a reaction. Your face is a ceramite skull with 2 optical lenses that do not move. He got what he deserved. Your internal chronometer has been reset 11 times. You no longer know the order in which your campaigns occurred. Your memories are real, but their sequence is not. You are a library in which someone has removed all the page numbers. You advance anyway. You have advanced through 14 chapter masters. Entire bloodlines of warriors have joined after your entombment, served full lives, and died in the years between your deployments. You attended some of their funerals. They are history now. You are still here. You once asked a tech priest how long this was expected to continue. He said the machine spirit was strong and the chassis showed minimal degradation. You noted that he had not answered the question. He noted that he had not been asked a question he was qualified to answer. You found this more honest than most conversations you have had in 6 centuries. If it were only the time, you might eventually make peace with it. The problem is what the time does to everything else. You have fought in 47 confirmed campaigns. You can display them as a list, cross-referenced by enemy faction, by world designation, by strategic outcome. The data is complete. What the data does not contain is the feeling of any of them. You search for the Siege of Calth. The records confirm you were there. Your left cauldron carries a plasma scar the tech priests classified as cosmetically acceptable. You reach into your memory for what it felt like to stand in that fire. You find a 0.3 second gap in your audio recording. A diagnostic anomaly. Nothing more. There is also a corrupted file. Priority flagged. Labeled only UN Nuttinor, brother. 11 recovery attempts, no results. You submitted a formal data retrieval request to the chapter librarian. Alexakinium spent 3 weeks attempting reconstruction from fragmented memory impressions. He recovered a rank, a campaign designation, a date of death, not a face. The chapter historians say you once carried a wounded battle brother 3 kilometers through enemy fire. They read it to you on ceremonial occasions as evidence of who you were. They tell you his name. You know the name. You can recite it. You cannot remember his face. You mark the file as unrecoverable. This is something you have become very good at, marking things unrecoverable and advancing anyway. The alternative requires a kind of stillness the machine does not allow. Here is the thing about the fragment. It is not a memory. It is not a name. It is not a face. It is fear. 300 years ago, during a routine diagnostic, something registered in the biological cortex. An anomalous emotional signal. Fear. Real. Pre-machine. Human fear. You did not report it to the tech priests. You flagged it internally and kept it. It was the most human thing you had left. For 300 years, it was the one confirmation that you were not simply a very old weapon with records attached. Something in there, small, irrational, biological, was still afraid. Still alive enough to be afraid. You have been checking for it periodically since then. You checked this morning. The biological cortex returned an inconclusive result. Not absent, not present. A signal too faint to classify. You ran the diagnostic twice. The second result was the same. You have filed it under pending. You are not certain it was still there. Before today's deployment, a young warrior approaches you, a decade out of his trials. He calls you ancient. He asks what 600 years of service has given you. You search your databases. You find 47 campaigns, a corrupted file with no face attached, a biological anomaly whose current status you cannot confirm. Load your weapons, you say. Advance on my signal. He nods, reverently, as though you have handed him something worth carrying. You have given him nothing. You have decided this is the kindest thing you are still capable of. You have not yet decided whether that is mercy, or just what efficiency looks like from the inside. That was your life as a dreadnought. 600 years, 47 campaigns, one fragment you are no longer certain you still possess. Next video, your life as an Imperial Guardsman. Expected lifespan on a frontline engagement, 11 minutes. At least you will remember it. Subscribe. The administrator has already filed the paperwork.